everything. And we're live. Welcome to episode 8. Check the gate. One-on-one with the Northeast Filmmakers Lab. I'm Mike Camoin. I'll be your host. And today's guest is Anasa Troutman, CEO of Culture Shift Creative.
Hi.
Welcome, Anasa.
Thank you. I'm just over here like, I'm going to share this to my Facebook
Oh,
page.
please do. You know what? You do that, and I'm going to do some intros. All
Okay,
right.
cool.
Check the Gate is a weekly program, twice weekly through May 2020, supported by the Capital Cinema Cultural Exchange, which it's a nonprofit empowering emerging filmmakers to complete and present their projects in a rapidly changing media landscape. And boy, is it changed. We do this through leveraging world-class industry expertise through the lab process. Thanks to our co-producer, Eric Vollweiler, publicist Tammy Reese, and behind-the-scenes student intern, a Great Dane from UAlbany's Luke Williams. Thank you, Luke. Today's sponsors include Price Chopper Market 32, Albany Wine and Dine, cheers. Crew Me Up, connect, create, collaborate, new app, crewmeup.com. If you want to catch our last episode on Tuesday, look up Josh Freeman, Crew Me Up, episode 7. And our new latest partner, yayflix.com out of Toronto. Thank you. All next week's guests include Alex Ferrari, Indie Film Hustle podcaster, and Emily Best, Seed and Spark. For those who are able, would like to become a sponsor, go online, like to make a donation of any size, donate at cinemaexchange.org/donate. Can't do it now, maybe in a year from now. Keep us in mind. Check the gate for those who don't know the term. When the gate is good, production moves forward. And with that, let's move forward. So Anasa,
Yes.
I would like to start off, I start off with a little sip of wine, water, anything. Would you like something to drink?
I would love water. I've been fasting, so I haven't had alcohol literally since December. So
Really?
that would be amazing.
Wow. How did you get through Sundance when we met without alcohol?
I literally don't know. Moment by moment, that's what it was. I just was, plus it was cold, so it was easy to stay focused on just keeping moving.
You are good. I know it's hot in Memphis. Here you go.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I need this.
All right, there you go.
Yes,
right.
so hot here. Yes.
So for folks who are tuning in, they may not know everything that you do. I'd like to read off a little bit.
Sure.
More, and then we can dive in deeper. You provide strategic and creative support in many important cultural, political, and social justice spaces. You've served as a consulting producer, trained transitional leadership of organizations to integrate cultural strategy as a community organizing tactic. You've produced festivals, curated artistic programming, shepherded many artists, including American singer-songwriter India Ari. You have your own TED Talk.
I do.
You've launched your own record album label, Groovement. We're going to dive into that. You help creative thinkers through the process of manifesting their vision and have been invited twice to the White House on cultural policy. We're going to dive into that. But your deepest love remains writing. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
There's a lot of cultural shift going on right now. Talk to us about this pandemic, how it has impacted you personally, your business, folks in Memphis. What's the hardest part of all this?
Well, interestingly enough, just for me personally in my everyday life, there hasn't been much change. So I have been an entrepreneur for most of my life. I live alone. I'm a workaholic, so I have been getting my groceries delivered for 2 years because I don't have time to grocery shop.
You're ahead of the curve.
And a lot of the way I live my life is the way now a lot of people are living their life, like working remotely, working with teams who are not in the space that you're in, having to figure out how to spend as much sounds terrible, spend as much time as you can in the house. The big thing for me that's changed is traveling, because I used to travel quite a bit for work. But again, like I said, I was fasting starting in the beginning of March. And so I had already put myself even on travel restrictions. So I have been home since the end of February and was planning to be home through the end of May. So I could do this big dramatic 40-day juice fast. And so not much has changed physically for me. My family is well, everybody is okay. The things that people are experiencing are not happening in my family, right? We have some extended family and some family friends who are being infected. We've had, one or two folks who have passed, but nobody like in my immediate circle, which I'm grateful for. This is really interesting because I've actually never been more aware of my privilege in this moment, because there's so many things that have not changed for me, and there's so many things for other folks that everything has changed. Their entire reality has changed. And so it's been interesting for me to experience what I've been experiencing, and then have to be a witness to what other folks are experiencing. And in fact, for the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, I had a lot of guilt because I was so comfortable, because not much has changed for me, because I don't have an ill family member, and I felt really guilty. And then I realized that the thing that is opening up for me that's happening in the pandemic is the things that we've been talking about institutionally for the past, in some cases, 20 years, are the things that now more and more and more people are talking about. So on the first hand, people are reaching for storytelling, and they're reaching for community, for comfort. And we've all been saying that for years. Like, if you want to build community, if you want to heal, then you reach for a story. You tell your own story, you listen to someone else's story, and that's how you make it through. So to see people like instinctively reaching for film, reaching for each other, having community on Zoom, listening to D-Nice DJ on Instagram Live, like those things, it's beautiful to me to watch our humanity reach for each other and reach for storytelling in that way. And the other thing that's happening is that all of the inequities in our society that are a result of race and class inequities are being lifted up, highlighted, and exacerbated by this pandemic. And so it's not just folks who are in social justice, it's not just people who are want to do social impact work, but literally everyone is in a conversation about these things, and you cannot not talk about it at this point. And so for me, the thing that got me out of my, like, I feel bad about feeling good in this moment, was the fact that, like, I actually need to feel good to start to lift up these conversations, because we are in a portal moment. There is no normal anymore. What happened, where we landed, 8 weeks ago or whenever we went inside, that reality is no longer a thing. Like, we can't go back to normal. We cannot go back to normal. There is no such thing anymore. And we're going to go forward. And as we go forward, we're either going to end up in a more dire social situation than we were, or one that is more equitable and more community oriented, and one that's built for all of us. And so I feel like in this moment, part of my job is to be able to help people through a conversation about what the future really looks like, and how we're telling stories that are shaping the future in a way that makes space for everyone to thrive and be joyful and to have community and all those wonderful, juicy things, because we've never had that before here. We've never had it. And I think that it's part of the creative's job to help to reimagine society, to help tell stories, to help other people reimagine society. And for me, there has not been a moment with this much possibility for a new story, a new collective story in my lifetime, and even my parents' or grandparents' lifetime, to be completely honest. And so on one hand, I am doing my best. I have had, a day here, a day there, where I feel the sadness and I feel the sorrow and I feel the pain of other folks. But most of what I've been doing is working to keep myself in a position of being generative and being creative and being connected, because I have the privilege of not having to be in the depth of pain right now. I have the privilege to be able to feel joyful and feel creative. And I feel like it's my duty in this moment to help bring that to other people and help bring folks into a conversation about where we're headed as a human race.
I am so glad you said all that you just did. So many things are firing off. And one is I was thinking this morning as to, well, why am I doing this show?
Yeah.
Um, and the answer I got was because I want to come out of this better and not worse. And there's a chance that we could come out of this and
Oh,
be worse off for it.
super easy for that to happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this whole issue, you hit on a bunch of things, and I want to go in deeper. Let's start with can we start with the topic of your TED Talk?
Sure.
Um, and just sort of summarize that, and then we'll go into some other things
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah. So my TED Talk is called From Justice to Joy. And it tells a story of the first time I was called the N-word. I was 7 years old, lived in Charleston, South Carolina. I was on the beach, walking down the beach with a friend, and a truck drove past us with these two men in it, and one of them yelled out the window at me and called me the N-word. And it really is a story about not the damage of that moment, but the thing that saved me from that moment, which was the culture that had been created in my family, that, that I wasn't an other because I was Black and female, but I was special because I was Black and female, and that I could do anything I want, and that I was loved and honored and seen and all those things. And it really was like my attempt to translate the possibility of that culture in my home out into the world, so that we lived in a culture where all of us felt held and seen and honored because of who we were, not in spite of who we were. And, a lot of modern social justice movements are for just that. They're for justice. And as far as I'm concerned, when we're talking about life and, we as Americans, we like to say life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If that is the ideal, then to reach for justice alone is a very low bar to ask for someone's life. If you're going to work your whole life, fight your whole life, spend all your resources, burn yourself out for something, then we should be, there's no should. I would like to spend that time and that energy fighting for joy, fighting for equity, fighting for abundance, fighting for community, knowing that if you have all those things, then justice is a given. Like, justice is built into all those things. And I want for us to start to dream bigger for our communities. I think that, we just a couple of days ago, the video came out of the young man who was chased and murdered by the two guys. And like, I don't want just justice for him and his family. I want them to be able to be joyful and to have abundance and to have choices. And for all of, the young folks out in the world for whom justice feels like a goal, to be able to open up the possibility even further and say, of course we should have justice. And I would also love to be able to thrive, right? Because you can have justice and still be under-resourced, still be underestimated, still be held back, still be harassed, still be all those things. And I just want more. I want more. So that's what my TED Talk was about. That's what it was about. It was also like, my TED Talk also was about healing for me, like the process of writing that story. And it was, I don't even think I had ever told my mother about that. So it was like one of those moments where I had to really dig deep to be able to excavate that story, process that story. I probably cried and cried and cried writing that story, and like went through an actual personal transformation, just getting it out and being able to translate that story in a way that really illustrated what I believe about the world and what I believe is possible about humanity. And even like creating some healing for myself and acknowledging that even people who do harm deserve to be welcomed into the beloved community and deserve to have their own healing. And yes, they have to come in being willing to do that work and being willing to confess, the ills of their behavior, but that this is not about this group versus that group, or that group versus that group. This is about how we build a culture where folks understand what love means, what accountability means, how we tell new stories so that people can live into that culture, because culture is just created by a set of stories that we all tell each other and tell ourselves. And I'm interested in creating and telling the stories that create the conditions for us to be able to actually be a family as humans, and not just a group of disparate people who don't know how to be in relationship with each other.
That's awesome. Thank you. So I'm curious, how did you get invited to the White House? Not just once, but twice. And talk to us about, if you can share, what took place.
Yeah. I mean, I have really smart friends, and I have, I have been doing this kind of work my whole adult life. I started my first business that had to do with culture when I was like still in college. I had a magazine with a friend of mine that was a art magazine, and we did all the, theater, music, movies, all the stuff. And then when I was 23, I had a record label, and the label was really about putting forth music and culture that felt liberatory and that felt like it was about equity and love and justice. And so I've never not done storytelling for social impact as an adult. I just have never done anything else. And so when you do something for that long, you become a part of a community of people who are doing the same thing that you do, because the work that we do, especially back then, was rare. So that, when you found someone that did that work with you, then you stick together, At the time, I had a fellowship at a place called the Movement Strategy Center. And so I was in a lot of conversations at foundations and other organizations with people who are doing work around cultural strategy. And then Obama got elected to the White House, and they wanted to have a conversation about cultural policy. And I happened to get on the list just because I know people who know them and who know me, and thought I would be good for the conversation. It definitely was like, a right place, right time conversation. The first time I went, there was a humongous group of people. It was probably maybe 30 of us who were invited the first time. And we were meeting with the policy advisor team, and it was really trying to get a handle on what was needed around cultural policy, what the possibility of cultural policy was. It was, a really fruitful conversation, but it really was like a briefing, like them sitting us down, asking us questions, and us talking about our work. The second time I went was a much more intimate conversation. I think that there were only 3 or 4 of us who went the second time. And we met with the head cultural, I don't remember what they called him. Anyway, it was a guy who was like the head of cultural policy.
Uh-huh.
And it was actually, what'd you say?
Head of Cultural Affairs, or
I don't remember what the title was, but at the time it actually was quite a frustrating conversation for me. And it was actually a turning point in my work, because I was trying to get across the point that the Obama administration could actually leverage culture for all kinds of policy. Like, this wasn't just about policy that was about culture and artists and creativity. Like, we actually could be using storytelling and culture to move criminal justice policy, to move economic policy, to move healthcare, to move all kinds of stuff, right? Because of the power of a story. And they couldn't get off of it just wasn't, like, it wasn't getting through. And it helped me understand that the work that we're doing is so fundamental and so intricate to human life. And it's like so powerful in terms of impacting policy and community being, that it was interesting to me that even people in the White House couldn't see it, right? And it was like, well, it's one thing to go to a foundation or to go into an organization and talk about culture and the power and the fundamental nature of culture, and for them to not get it. But when you go all the way to the White House and they're like, yeah, cultural policy, right? And I'm like, no, literally any policy, any conversation, anything you want to move, you can do it with storytelling as a foundation. And they just could not wrap their minds around it. And it made, for me, the work that I was doing change, because I realized that I couldn't just talk about it, write about it, teach it, that I actually had to do the practical part of it too. And I had to actually engage in cultural strategy to be able to show the possibility of it, that I had to make stuff. I had to lean into myself as a creative, as a writer, as a designer, and as a producer. And it changed the course of my work.
Wow, that's amazing. There you are, and you needed to lead again through lead the leaders.
I mean, but it was also like a very humbling experience, like to be who I was in that moment and grew up in the house that I grew up in, and then to be invited to the White House to address the, you know, cabinet members from the first Black president. Like, I remember walking through the gate. I remember like almost every moment of that day, both times. And just like the magnitude of that moment for me was very humbling and very exciting. I probably cried. I definitely didn't have on that right outfit because I was trying to be like, I have to look presidential. I can't wear my normal clothes. So it wasn't really, it was a great day. It was a great day. If I went today, I would wear, I mean, not just today in this White House, but I mean, like, if as the person I am now, had I been invited, I would have done a lot of things differently, but it was, you know, beautiful.
What would you do? What's one thing you do differently going to this White House?
I definitely would have worn a different outfit for sure, because I was being very conservative and not dressing like myself. But what I would do now really is talk about the work differently, because I have different language now, because, you know, that was 10 years ago. I have much different language and I have different experiences with the work, right? So I have, the model is articulated differently. I would have been able to present it differently so that folks could actually understand it, even if they didn't agree, which is fine. Like, if you don't agree with me, God bless you in all your endeavors. But at least I would have felt more confident that I would have been able to convey the message, convey the model, convey the importance. I have a whole metaphor that I developed after that about how to talk about culture, how to have people understand what I mean when I say culture, because a lot of folks collapse art, culture, and creativity into one thing as if they are all the same. But they are very, very different and have vastly different mechanisms inside of a conversation about social impact. And so to be able just to say, like, here's the vocabulary that we're working with, and like, let's create that as a foundation so that we can move forward together in a conversation about what it means to use these things together to be able to create policy change or community change or whatever it is that you're trying to do.
So I know you and I share a common interest in seeing this predatory lending of student loans go away.
Yes.
So what's one strategy out of what you're talking about, how you would approach that to introduce that subject, particularly as it impacts Black females the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that people forget about stuff like predatory student lending is that there are way more people who have the same story than there are not, right? Like, the number of people who can say, this is my experience and it matches yours and yours and yours and yours and yours and yours and yours, and it was bad. It's a lot of people, right? The other thing about things like this is that people feel powerless in it. So like, if you decide, I'm not paying this student loan, forget these people, then bad things happen to you, right? And so you don't actually feel like you have the agency to do anything. And one of the things that's powerful about the work that you're doing and like binding these stories together is to, one, say, actually, like, there are a lot of us, more than we thought. And two, if we are in sync with each other, there are things that we can do to protect ourselves and each other from punitive action, right? And we can reimagine what this looks like. So instead of trying to spend all of our time dismantling and stopping and ending, that we actually can reimagine how we want to show up in this space, what lending looks like, how we go to school, like how do we get school to be paid for? Like somebody has to reimagine access to education, because if folks are getting loans so that they can go to school, the goal is not to get a loan, the goal is to go to school. So all that requires is that someone reimagine what that looks like and find another way for people to get education, right? And so if somebody comes up with a new solution, people are going to be like, bump those school loans. I don't even need that because I don't care about it in the first place, right? So like,
well, the universities are going to have to be part of this because they're
yes.
going to be hard hit come
Yep.
starting this fall. I've talked to some people who are considering whether or not to go to college this fall, whether they put it off.
Yeah, and even
But
the
here's the other
schools are
thing.
gonna open the revenue model that they have that depends so heavily on the room and board money. Like they're not gonna get that, even for kids who end up coming back remotely. They're gonna be. I know I have friends who work in the university system. My sister works in the university, and both her school and another friend of mine are already talking about budget cuts, right? But that's the other opportunity for storytelling, is that you can, through storytelling, create unusual alliances. Because in the past, like, to be able to go to a trustee or a college president and say, like, we need your partnership on talking about how to pay for school and ending predatory school lending, that's not a conversation they were interested in, because that's how they made their money, right? But now in this moment, again, here we go with like the pandemic and the opportunity that is opening up to have a new conversation. You now can build an alliance between the university systems, the public school systems, and the students, to be able to say, like, this didn't work a year ago, but now it really doesn't work. And none of us are going to make it unless we find another way, and unless we hold those folks accountable.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things you and I talked about early on is that and we do this in the lab, but we try to do it, is that it's not just the story that we've got to look out for. We've got to really be thinking about the marketing, the outreach, the political strategy.
Yeah.
How should storytellers be thinking about the marketing side, the strategy, for those people who want to create social issue-oriented stories with an impact? What are the things, 2 or 3 things they need to be thinking about, even right now in development?
I think that there are actually 4 things that they need to think about. I think ultimately and initially they need to think about the story, because the story is fundamental. The story is, like, if you're talking about a culture shift around something, and when we talk about culture shift as opposed to like a policy shift, we're talking about, you can change a law or you can change the way we think about something, right? So the law is like, of course that's going to be the law, because it reflects who we are as a society. And I think that, like, while there are people who do frontline work, and that's really important, that there need to be people, and I think especially artists, who are thinking about the long-term systemic cultural shift that'll make some of this frontline work no longer an issue. So first and foremost, the story has to be really intentional, because there is a set of values and a vision that you are embedding in that story, right? And so it's important that you are intentional, not just about like telling the story that comes out of your creative self, but also how are you embedding the messages, the core values, the vision, the conversations that you want to have in that story, and how are you paying attention to the aesthetics? Because I think a lot of folks sometimes are so wrapped up in the message that they forget that this is something that has to attract people, that has to entertain people, that has to hold their attention, right? And so it has to be good. Like, don't tell me you want to change my mind and then show me something that's totally whack. Don't do that, because I didn't get past the first 5 minutes, right? If you want to change my heart, you want to change my whole entire heart, you better show me a good film. You better show me a good book. You better show me the most beautiful painting ever in life. And if you are not the person who is going to do that, then partner with other artists and creatives who can bring that je ne sais quoi to your work, right? So that you can help to inform and help to build the foundation for the story, but that you're actually working with artists who understand how to be able to do that, like, come hither to audiences, because it's really important. It's really important. So that's the first thing, is like the storytelling. What are you embedding, what are you embodying in the story, and how amazing the story is. The second thing that we need to think about is really like collaborate. I believe in collaboration. I do. I've never actually have made a rule for myself that I don't do anything without collaborating, because I know, like, when you find people who have a kindred heart, with you and they have like their own vision, it only makes it better. And if you can release your ego and just be in the process, it's like the most beautiful transformative thing that happens to you. So yes, collaborate. The second thing we need to be thinking about is engagement, which I think is like brings in kind of the conversation about marketing. I call it public engagement, which is for me a combination of audience building and movement building. Because again, there are lots of folks who are great at one or the other. Traditional film companies who are like, we know how to build an audience. We're going to show this movie to 5 million people and we're going to change the world. And it doesn't work like that. Or people who are on the movement building side and they're like, we are going to do this engagement and we're going to go very deep, but their reach is not big enough to make an actual tipping point impact. And so to be able to develop the acumen of both understanding how to build depth in your engagement so people are actually having the conversations that they need to have to make that shift inside of themselves and inside of their communities, and to do that to a scale where you actually can make a difference, because depth with 500 people might not be enough to end global warming, right? But maybe depth with, you know, however many is enough. And so I think that the engagement is really important. How are you creating space for your audience to talk to you and to each other, most importantly, about the themes inside the work? Because when you do that, then it becomes real for them. Like thinking about some small circles, like saying to your audience, hey, here is a kit. You can take this and have your audience invite 10 people to their house to have dinner and have these discussion questions. Because then the information that you did, you know, like I'm going to tell you a terrible story. And that is that the two movies that I watched are the reason why I built this model. The first movie was Inconvenient Truth, because I watched that movie. I went by myself and I watched the whole movie and I was like in complete anguish and ready, like, I will do anything. What do we have to do? We have to save the planet. Woo! And all the things that they told us to do were in the credits. Every single solution was in the credits on the screen and people were walking out. And I was literally the only person in the theater at the end when the last solution rolled. And I'm like, how are you giving me all of this? You blew my heart open. You had me ready for action. And then nobody except for me saw the solutions. What am I supposed to do with that? And then there's nowhere to go. Right. And then the other movie was like as much of a, you know, what's the name of that movie with the blue people? Avatar. Right. So I saw an interview with James Cameron on Oprah, and Oprah was like, why did you make this movie? And he said, because I wanted to bring attention to indigenous rights and land rights, is what he said. Literally more people saw that movie than any movie in the history of the world. And I bet you that 10% of them didn't know that movie, that he was trying to make a difference about land rights and indigenous rights, because he never said that in public. He never gave people a chance to be able to have that conversation in their communities. And there was never anything for them to actually do to make that right. And even though like an argument can be made that that was a white savior movie that had problematic race and gender context and all that, like I get it. And I'm not saying that's not true, but what I am saying is that that was the most seen movie in the history of movies at that time, and not one thing was done to be able to manifest a change around indigenous rights or land rights, and that was his intention. Now, what he did was make a gorgeous film that we all saw and that we all loved, and he didn't reach his ultimate goal, which was to be able to have a real conversation about indigenous rights, right?
And he needed you, and he needed a plan. And it's a lost opportunity. It was
well, you know, like I swear to God, I've been looking for James Cameron since the day I got out that movie. I promise you, I've been like, I need to talk to this man. So like, but that's why I started this work. That's why I articulate it in the way that I do, because I'm like, there are filmmakers and songwriters and book writers and printmakers who are telling powerful stories, but then they have no legs beyond the entertainment value, beyond the inspiration value. Like, and I love being inspired. I love going to a movie and cry. I love ending the book and being like, oh my God, I love that. That's like my favorite thing. But like, I'm not here for people's entertainment, and I'm not here for people's inspiration. I'm here because I think it's time for us to change this country and change this world. And in order to do that, we can't do that without stories, but stories is not enough, right? And so we have to have the storytelling, but we also have to be able to say, like, here's how we actually get people to engage in a real conversation about what this means in their life and what this means in their work and what this means in their communities. And there's a lot of ways to do that, but we have to have those conversations. And then the third thing for me is like an embodied practice, because even after you get, like, I could show you a movie and you and I could have dinner 10 weeks in a row about that movie and what we learned in it. And then we could just go back to our lives and be like, well, that was a great conversation. I love going to dinner with him. That red wine he picked out was perfect. And what a great, rich conversation. So we actually have to give people embodied practices so that they actually can practice in their lives the things that we're asking them to do. Because, like, a lot of the things that we want, folks who believe in social impact and who are working hard, like, if you just think about the environment, right, which is like a very like baseline progressive value. Like, if you're anywhere left of center, then you believe that in the planet, in the glory of the nature, and it should be protected and saved. But even then, like, protecting our planet and acting in ways that are in alignment with the health of the planet are actually outside of American culture. It's not in our culture to reduce, reuse, recycle. It's not in our culture to think about the health of animals and the environment. It's not in our culture. Our culture is consumer based. It's throwing stuff away. It's microwave culture. And so the way that we have treated the planet is actually like an outgrowth of who we actually are as a society. And so if you want for us to change our behavior with the planet, we actually have to change our way of being, right? Because, you know, I would even argue that if you think about like the history of the country and the disregard for land, that appeared in the, you know, in the original sin of America around the stealing of land and massacre of the indigenous people. And then you talk about slavery, the stealing of people and the stealing of labor. For me, that comes from the same place that the raping and the killing of the earth come from, right? So like, this is who we have been since the beginning as people who live in America. And so our conversation really has to be about centering people, centering love, centering integrity, centering care, personal care and mutual care. And that is like a complete and utter shift in who we are. And that is how you're going to get, you know, global warming to stop, not by not using plastic. I'm not saying you should use plastic. No one should use plastic. But I'm also saying, like, that's not enough. This work is about creating fundamental shifts in the way of being, and then helping people to practice what that means in their everyday life. And so, like, the third thing is embodied practice. And then the fourth thing for me is really about the use of technology. Like, if I do a Google search and then somebody sends me an email about like buying the thing I just searched for, or I get an ad on Amazon, like, folks are using data to be able to get people's attention. And we don't do a good job of doing that. We don't use technology properly. It's the 21st century, for God's sake. It's all the way 2020. And we are not doing a good job of using technology to learn more from people, to listen to them better, to alter our messages more closely, and certainly not to enrolling people in the kind of sustained action that creates change. Like, we are using technology to ask people to sign petitions. That doesn't change anybody. Like, I could literally go sign a petition and leave my house and dump a barrel of oil on my front lawn, like literally, and not feel like I'm out of alignment with myself, right? So it's like, when are we going to understand that technology, while it's not the whole answer, it definitely gives us a lot more access to impact people's behavior than we give it credit for. So to me, if you're trying to do social impact work and you're an artist or a creative, that is my formula for doing it. There are other formulas that I'm sure are equally effective, but if you're asking me, that's what I would say.
Wow, that's quite a formula. You've put a lot of, you know, your life experience into creating that, and I want to help. I want to help you, and I want to help filmmakers learn from you, because I know in our lab we've got filmmakers who do want to create change. You know, they want to create some kind of social impact. That's the only thing that the lab does. But you know, when those stories that come along, they need the right platform. They need the right smarts and brains and support.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think that there's like a lot of storytelling that people don't see on the surface of social impact, but that are stories that are about love or about building community or building relationships or about integrity that really are about informing who we are becoming as a society that I think are important because a lot of the like issue-based social impact work is as a result of like lack of depth in terms of the like more human and emotional stuff. And so a lot of the social impact work is a lot easier if people understand what love is, if people understand how to connect, if people understand. I saw a meme the other day. It said it costs $0 to admit that you're wrong. But that's just not like we don't. That's not people don't. We're not taught that growing up. Just to be like, man, I messed up. Oh, I'm so sorry. What
Right.
can I do to make amends and to move forward? That's not part of our culture, right? So even things like that, they're really about our fundamental beings as humans and folks who interact with each other. Go a long way into creating a culture where people can be well, and that our music can be well, and that our policies can be well, and our all those things like come out of basic like human connection and respect and honor for each other.
Particularly during this time, there's lots of mistakes going on, right? We can't deny.
Yeah, of course.
And working from home is a challenge. God bless teachers who deal with young
Wow.
kids, and
Mm-hmm.
people like Andy, who's on with us. And I want to invite folks for the time that we have left. If anybody has a question, you can either type it in, or I'll even unmute you, and you can ask your question directly of Anasa. This would be a great time if anybody's working on something, wants to throw it out, and just get some free consultation. Would you be okay with that? Yeah.
I'll be great with it. Yes, I probably do it too much. I'm like trying to reel myself in and just talking all the time for free. But I can't help it. It's my favorite conversation. I can't help it.
Oh my
Fun.
goodness.
This is so fun to me. Aren't you having fun? I'm
I,
having
I'm having total fun because I just think about how all the ways that it could apply.
fun. Mm-hmm.
And I have that hope for the future that we're going to have to create it.
Oh yeah,
It
yeah.
ain't just going to happen.
No, that is the whole point of this. And this is why artists are so important because the future that we have is the future that we're going to create. However it goes, like whether it gets more difficult and more uncomfortable or easier and more joyful, it's going to be because we created it. And that's either passively or any other way. And like, that's why to me, artists are so important because artists are the ones that have access to the imagination necessary to build a new world. Like everyday people who are like, I'm not an artist, I'm not creative, like those folks that have no access to be able to reimagine. And it's our job to be able to say to people like, hey, take my hand, let me walk you through this, let me show you what's possible so I can blow up in your mind, your imagination too. So like I'm all about creating the new world. World building is what we call it in my little group. We're like, we're building worlds out here. We're building worlds for people to step into. And like, that's the job of the artist.
We've got a question here from Lauren. Lauren, I unmuted you if you'd like
Hi,
to.
Lauren.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. You sound amazing.
Hi, you do too. Thank you. Hi. Yeah, a question I have. Do you have any recommendations on best ways to get to know cultures other than your own when you want to accurately represent cultures in storytelling and be respectful and, just kind of what are some of your ideas on how to really approach that in a respectful way?
Yep. I mean, I think that the most important thing in that conversation is relationship building because part of the problem with folks who are like, what is that? There is a saying, and I don't remember like what culture it came from, but it's something like the word freedom sounds most powerful coming from your own language, which is really about not just language, but it's about like actually being a person to speak for yourself and storytelling, right? And I think all too often we see stories that we're like, that is an amazing story. I want to tell that story. And we never involve the people whose story it is, right? We don't really ask permission. We just kind of show up and we're like, this is amazing. I'm going to tell everybody about you. And then we expect them to be excited because we're excited and we want everybody to know. When really the thing is like, there is such a thing of learning how to enter and exit community respectfully, sustainably, safely for the folks who you are looking to uplift, and even for yourself. And so for me, the most important thing there is about relationship building, and like building authentic relationship where you're not only transparent, but you're also vulnerable, which is two different things, right? And you go in with your stories, you listen to their stories, and you build the kind of relationship that allow you to tell the story together. Because you should, I mean, should is a strong word. I would not recommend that you ever go into anybody's space, specifically another culture, and decide that it is your duty and your responsibility to tell that story. What I would recommend is that you go in, collaborate, and say, I think your story is really important. Can we work together to lift up that story and tell it in a particular way? Because I think, one, the storytelling will be much more rich if you do that, because you actually get the perspective from the inside that you're never going to have. And two, because like the story, the community that the stories are being told about feel more honored. They feel like they actually matter, not just their story matters, because we often treat people like their stories matter and they don't. And so you know, I would err on the side of not doing it if you don't have the time to have that kind of depth. Because I also feel like we all have really important, powerful stories, no matter who we are and where we come from. Like the thing that makes us human are our stories. And so like, if you don't have the space to be able to have that kind of depth with a community that is not your community, then I would recommend that you find like, what is the thing about that community, and how do you learn how to see that in yourself and your own community, and like pull that out as part of your storytelling until you get to the point, because it might take you 5 years to build a kind of relationship, right? And so, but I think it's worth it, and I think that's what it takes. I think it's like one of those times where we have to learn how to step back and create space for other storytellers to come forward in support of the things that we want to see manifest.
Oh my God, so grateful to have you on. So this question comes to us from Facebook, and I
Yes.
believe from Carmen Lookshire, who is a musician. She starred in a film, actress. She's got a great story. She asks, how do you increase the exposure if you have the story? And perhaps maybe tell us a little bit about India Ari and how you brought her along.
Yeah. So tell me the woman's name again. Who we're talking? First of all,
Carmen.
you're welcome, Lauren. Thank you for your question. Thank you for listening to me talk for this long. Carmen. So Carmen is an actress. She is in a film, and she wants more.
Singer-songwriter primarily, but she has done some acting.
Yes. Yeah. So that's like that's a hard question, right? Because that's everybody's question, is like, how do I get more people to watch my stuff, to listen to my stuff, to read my stuff? That's all of our question. And I think like what I would ask you is, to what end? Like, what is your goal with your music or your film? Who is your audience? And like, it's so funny when I do like organizational develop, I'm developing a new project right now, and my coach is like, who's the audience? I'm like, everyone in the whole world is the audience. I want everyone to see it. And she's like, no, like seriously, who is your audience? And I think that those are hard questions for artists to answer, because we all want our stuff to be seen by people on Mars, even, not just all the Earthlings. And so like, what are you working to accomplish, right? And who are the people who love you naturally, and who are your low-hanging fruit, right? And so the thing to me, especially if you're not working with big budgets, is to build organically. And there's this theory about like having a core audience, and like, who are the people who you can talk to all the time, whether it's 100 people or 1,000 people that listen to you, who are your fans, who are going to show up every time you go live or every time you put something out. And how do you start with them and then build a network within their pre-existing network? So every one of your 100 core fans has 10 or 20 friends that they talk to about books and music and all those things. And it's like a more of an organizing approach than it is like a marketing approach, because if you don't have the kind of capital to build a sustained, large marketing campaign that a big studio or a big label would, then you have to do it person by person, hand to hand, which is again back to the conversation about relationships. It's like, how are you building relationships with the people who are in your fan base? how are you growing those relationships? There's a body of work that I studied a few years ago that was really about building networks without having heavy organizations. And there's like this way to talk about pre-existing networks. There's a way to talk about, who are your champions. But like if you have an engagement ladder, right? And you have like 4 levels of engagement. The first one is like me, who just heard your name for the first time. Oh my God, Carmen, she's a musician. I'm interested in what she has to say. So I'm like, what are you showing me? What are you giving me? How are you pulling me into the next level? And then when I get to level 2, I'm like, I bought the record. I'm looking, I liked your Facebook page. Like, what are you saying to me now that I'm in that next level? And how are you going to increase me to the next one? So like now I'm level 3. I've joined your fan club. I'm like, joined your Patreon. So I'm giving you $10 a month. And like, then how are you getting me to the ultimate level, which is like, I'm now like a virtual block captain. It's my job to recruit other people. It's my job to like tell my friends about your music. And I am now the person who is bringing people into level 1. And you only have to bring in this many because I'm going to tell so many people that I'm going to now be a recruiter for you without calling myself that, right? And so those are the kinds of things that we need to think about, which not only like grows your audience, but it also creates audiences that are really, loyal and who are going to stand by you. Like if I've gone through all that and I'm like love you so much and I'm so invested in you that I'm helping bring other people into the engagement ladder, then like I'm never leaving you. I'm never leaving you, Carmen. Like you got me for life. If you put out 10 records, I'm buying everyone. When you go on tour in 2 years, when we can go back outside, I'm coming to your thing with my little mask on. Like I'm with you. My mask is going to be like, go Carmen, and I'm with you. So like those fans don't ever leave you. And so like if your goal is to be able to have a career where you can sustain your life and your work through your music, you don't need a Grammy to do that. You don't need lights to do that. You need like 1,000 people who are going to buy every record. You need 500 people who are going to come to every show, right? You need those kind of folks. And I think that like having that longevity is also what gives you the depth to go to scale, because if you have fans that are that loyal, that's how you like get the overnight success in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. Wow.
Thank you for your question, Carmen. Good luck, and like send me your stuff. I want to listen to it.
Oh, that is so awesome, Anasa. She is thrilled. I am sure.
Oh, you asked me about India. I didn't tell you about India. So
yes,
India is like actually like my first experiment in culture shift was India. I met India. I was probably 23 years old, and we worked together for a long time. We still work together today. We're launching a new campaign for her on Monday. But to me, India was one of the first artists who I ever met that I was like, oh, she has a very clear vision for the world. It's like super palpable in her commitment to healing and her commitment to the power of women and her commitment to her spiritual practice and like the power that has for other people has never not been what it is. Like if you've ever seen her, she's always been the same in those things. And for me, my goal as her friend first, but also someone who believes in her, and also someone who is like, my vision for the world can't be real if her vision for the world is not real, then like my commitment to her and supporting her work has really driven the building of this model. Also, it's been another place where I can continue to see like being on tour with her, and her first tour was the way I knew the ideas I had were real, because women were coming up to me and saying like, my daughter is different now because she heard this song. She looks at herself different and she walks different. She acts different. And my work with India is how I knew any of this was going to work in the first place, and what encouraged me to continue to go and to try to build this model. And for a long time, I just focused on that, and we didn't work together because I was like in this fellowship, building this model, doing all this writing. And when I came out of that fellowship and I had to go back into the world and figure out like, am I going to be a writer and a teacher? Or am I going to actually do this work? Back to India's infrastructure is where I went. And I like honed my ideas and my model based on watching who she is and what she does. And she's been an incredible teacher for me in this work. And it's really beautiful now that we're both grown-ups and like I'm clear, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. Let's go. And I'm like, yes. Let's do another level of work. And it's been really exciting to be able to work so closely with somebody who's my actual friend, because a lot of people you work with and you're just like, I love you and I respect you, but we're not really friends, and so I don't have any like real personal stake in this, but like she's one of my best friends, and it's like a real gift to be able to work with somebody so closely who I believe in so much as a performer and an artist and a visionary, but also who is like somebody who I care about in my actual life.
That's awesome. Well, isn't that a great combination to have that?
Yes.
You're working with a friend, and you have a mutual, it's like a double, triple dose when it comes together just right.
It's the best.
So before we go, I've got 2 more questions. I call this the Abby Singer. And I ask everybody lately who's come on the show, do we need artists in our communities? Do we need storytellers, musicians? Are we essential?
Yes. Like no explanation. Yes, with a very all capitals exclamation point 5 times. Yes, artists are essential. Artists both show us who we are and show us who we can be. And I think that both of those things are very, very important.
That's awesome. We did get a question from Facebook from Rob. How does Anasa manage all of her projects?
Does Anasa manage all of her projects? I don't know. I will tell you, Rob, that thank you for your question. That is been the focus of my life for the past couple of years, because I do a lot of projects. Like I probably have 5 or 6 right now, and 1 that's being born. The first thing I did was like, I am clear that my brain is the kind of brain that makes stuff all the time. Like I have 100 ideas a day, and some of them I'm like, that would be so dope, and I'm like, but I can't do that. And some of them I'm like, I have to do that. Like I have to. There's no way I could not do that. And I learned that I could do as many projects as I could build teams for. So the first thing I do is like, I don't start another project unless I have a team of people who can execute, because I know I'm good at visioning, I'm good at the ideas, I'm good at the relationship building, but I am not detailed oriented. I'm not like an execution person. That's not my jam at all. And so like, I know that my ideas come to life when I have people I can depend on, who I can enroll in my vision, and who I can share the vision with them in such a way that it becomes theirs too, and that they can put themselves in it. And I can be like, look at what just happened with this idea I had. This is incredible. And I can be a part of the team and not feel like I have to lead every team. And that's really important. The second thing is really like learning how to be a better businesswoman. Like I have been an entrepreneur since I was in my 20s, and I have most of the time been a solopreneur and been like just figuring it out and putting things together with like MacGyver style. And at some point I realized like I'm actually worthy of having my ideas fully resourced and supported, and I actually can do more powerful work in the world if I have an infrastructure that I need to be the woman and the visionary and the business owner that I am. And so my recent thing has been like learning how to build real infrastructure, not just for projects, but like for who I am as a visionary and for like the company itself. So all the things that we have to have in place to make sure that the financials are tight, to make sure the operations happen the way they're supposed to. It's really about building a team. I could have just said build a team, Rob, is what I could have said. But like, it's important for us to know that we're not in this alone. It's important to know that we can't do this alone. Even if you think you are in it alone, like you actually cannot do any of this by yourself. That you're not meant to do it by yourself, that we're meant to be in community, to work in community, to learn how to build things together. And when I was like in my 20s, I was reading an article in USA Today about conglomerates. And there was like somebody who I knew peripherally in the music industry who they were like, this woman has 6 companies. And I'm like, she has 6 companies. I could have 6 companies too. And then there was like the middle spread that had Rupert Murdoch's conglomerate, and it was literally like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies. And I'm like, that's just because he has enough infrastructure and money to manage the weight of that infrastructure. And so it made me know that I could grow my ideas as big as I can grow my capacity. And so that's how I get it done. Is I have team members who I can't live without. I wouldn't be able to do one project without having a team, much less all the ones that I have. So like, build your team, figure out who your people are, like figure out what you're good at and what you're bad at, and like get people to do the stuff that you're bad at. Because I'm bad at a lot of stuff. I'm really good at some stuff, but there's a lot that I'm like terrible at, and I don't pretend like I'm good at it. I'm like, I have no ego. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I don't like doing that. I'm not gonna do it. Like, can you please, like, do you love doing that? Please come do this with me, because there's space for everybody to be joyful and feel fulfilled in the work, and that to me is the goal and how you get it done.
That's awesome advice, and I think it's true. We do need to delegate. We need to bring other people in, and that does help get things done. It's something that's taken me a while to learn.
Yeah.
So here's my last question. I
Yes.
call it the martini. We talked about this perhaps earlier, but if there's a renaissance coming out of all of this, what needs to be done by organizations and artists? What do we need to be doing now in order to create that renaissance? You sort of answered it, I think, in all of this. But
That's interesting. I actually don't know. So the first thing is I want to tell Rob one more thing. I have one sentence for you, Rob. Lead with an open hand. Like, you can be the leader and still make space for other people's leadership in your institution, and that is how you get it all done. Like, don't hoard it. Just be who you are and let other people be who they are too. That's how you get it done. All right. So renaissance. If we're going to have a renaissance, what do people need to do? You know what? It's so, like, I could say 100 things, but the thing that is ringing so loud in my ear is tell the truth. Like, that's what I feel like. I think, like, if we're going to have a real renaissance here in the United States and across the world, like, the most important thing is to tell the truth. We tell each other and ourselves so many untruths every day about who we are, about who we've been, about what we're really invested in, about what's possible. And like, on both sides, like, we are, even if you think about education in schools, the curriculum is not true all the time. Like, the way that we communicate with each other is like, we don't know how just to say the thing. Like, say the thing. Like, you don't have to be mean about it. You don't have to be sheepish about it. Just say, like, Mike, this is how I feel right now. Right. And I'm going to own how I feel, and let's talk about it, because that is how we're going to get to the other side of any difficult conversation, right? Like, if we're talking about race or class or gender or politics or science or whatever the thing is, like, we have to learn how to see the truth in each other's humanity first, because like, that's what's going to create the space for me just to say whatever I need to say to you. As difficult as it may or may not be, I can just be like, I have this thing to say to you. It's going to be really hard, but just sit here with me and let's walk through it, and we'll get to the other side together. That's how you build relationship. You say the hard thing and you live to tell the tale, right? So like, if we're going to really, 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 really have a renaissance here, and we're really going to open up and be a different kind of society, we have to learn how to tell each other the truth, the social truth, the political truth, the economic truth, the soul truth. And we have to be like, create space for possibility, because that is also true. It's not just the hard truth, it's also the fun, beautiful, spiritual, deep truths that we are all one human family, that we are all meant to live an abundant life, that abundance does not mean abundance for one person. Abundance is for everybody, or it's not abundance. And like, we can make it, right? And like, we have to be honest about who's been left behind and who's been stepped on, and we have to go back and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry that we stepped on you. Let us help lift you up, and let's walk together forward. Like, we have to tell the truth, or we're not going to have a renaissance and nothing around here. It's the truth. That's where I am. Like, I just not been a lot of truth in America, and it's time. It's beyond time. Like, we're grown. We can handle it. We are grown as a nation. We can handle the truth. Let's just all hold hands and tell the truth together.
Wow. That's so awesome. One last question. It's been stuck in here from Kai. My son is a photographer and a music producer. Are there any avenues to earn money during this pandemic? You gotta be creative, right?
I mean, Yes. So there's a man here in Memphis who is a photographer who's doing a series. I can't remember the name of it, but he has been going around to people's homes and taking photographs of them inside their homes, sheltered in place. And it's a beautiful, beautiful series. And it's just like a way, it was a way for him to find creative expression in a moment where he, all the things that he would normally be doing as a photographer, he's not doing right now, right? That doesn't answer the question about how to make money.
But it gives them an idea, and perhaps you can put it out like Carmen's doing with your music, and then people make donations and say, "Hey, I like that."
All of that. And sometimes our creative pursuits are not our financial pursuits. And that is just the reality of the artist's life, right? Like, yes, he could make music online, compose music, sell it to independent films. He could sell it to podcasts. I'm looking for some music for my podcast right now. He could, there's all kinds of things that.
Carmen can help you out there. She's got some music.
My podcast is called The Big We. You can find us on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. So just DM me at The Big We. But, and like, there's this is it's 2020. Everything happens remotely, right? There's music. People who are making music for a living are doing it remotely. No one goes into the studio anymore. Their studios in their house. They're uploading files. They're switching things out. So like, there is a way to make music, not just in this pandemic, but like in 2020, doing it remotely, right? Internationally, all those things. No, not the big wig, the big we, like us, me, you, us, we. We. Are you trying to say something about my hair?
Right, I'm gonna type it in.
But I think that for me, that what comes up for me when that question is asked is like, is this what I said, the truth that sometimes our creative pursuits are not our financial pursuits. And like, it takes a person who understands both creativity and business to be able to make a living at being an artist, because it's not just music, it's a music business. It's not just film, it's a film business. And that's, some of the times when collaboration is important, because there might be somebody who was like, I am a brilliant artist, and someone who's like, I'm a brilliant business person, and we can come together and create a space where you can make money and I can make money based on my business acumen and your creative acumen. But everybody is not like that, right? And so not every artist is going to be able to make a living being an artist until we get to a society that reveres and supports artists in such a way that we go back to a system of patrons again, right? So that's something to think about too, is if artists are essential, and we don't live in a society that supports artists in the way that they should be to create in the way that we need them to, like, how do we actually get to a place where there are artists who are supported just so they can create, just so they can be sitting there dreaming and imagining on all of our behalf and coming up with new ways for us to imagine and dream together? I think that's a really important thing for a society that's on the brink of a shift. Like, whose job is it to reimagine all of this? Like, whose job is that? And who's going to make sure those folks are eating and getting healthcare and all that? Because we can't leave the artists behind. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know that's not what you asked me, Kai, but I'm just saying that's where you took me today. It's like, bring back patrons.
That is awesome. Okay, so do you have time for one more question? People are.
I think so. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Lauren asks. She had a really great question before, so we're going to allow this. Is there an easy way to find the balance between advocating for social change and being too preachy? Or do you say screw it and not worry about that too much?
You know what? I just had this conversation, Lauren, with a friend of mine.
Oh, wow.
I think that it's not about how much you talk. I think it's about the framework that you use, right? Because I can say to you, like, I can call you every day and say to you the whatever the catchphrase is for the next campaign, right? I can talk to you about police brutality or cleaning the ocean, saving the whales. I could talk to you about a lot of things. But the thing is, like, if you actually want someone to hear you, are you going to use your language, or are you going to use language that both of you can relate to? Because if you don't give a crap about the ocean, me saying to you, save the whales every day is not going to really move you at all. But if I say to you, like, let's talk about like humanity and who we want to be as humans and what are our core values as humans. Well, we want to love each other. We want to respect the planet. We want to do like, that's what love looks like. Great. Well, included in that is saving the ocean. Right. And so I don't think you can be too preachy. If you can be too preachy, I'm probably like been too preachy for most of my life. And I don't see myself that way. I see myself as a truth teller. And I think that sometimes we are so committed to like righting the wrong, which is the other thing that From Justice to Joy was about. Like, we're so focused on like erasing the wrong that we don't help people create a vision for a new way to live. So like, as opposed to being like, hey, the ocean is so dirty, we need to clean it up. We can be like, imagine what a world would be like, what it would mean for us to live in a world where there were clean and healthy oceans, and help people reimagine from that space. Because part of that feeling of like being preachy is folks either are like, I don't want to hear about this problem anymore, or they feel disempowered and don't think there's anything they could do about it because the problem feels so big. You're asking us to like change this big nasty thing and take it away, when there's no joy in that, there's no inspiration in that, there's nothing in that to help people keep moving, right? And so like, for folks who don't feel attached, like, it's easy for you or I, or folks who are in social justice and social impact work every day, to identify the things and see like, that has to stop. I need to contribute to that. But your average person is not focusing on those things. Your average person is going to respond to being inspired, being shown a new possibility, being invited into a world where there is joy and freedom and peace, right? And that doesn't mean that you sugarcoat it. It means absolutely you tell the truth, you tell the facts, you show the hard things, like you do all that work, and then you invite people into something that's possible, right? Like we don't need to harp on that, because that is true. We will say it as often as we need to remind people and to bring them back, but the work has to be about manifesting a new reality, manifesting peace and joy and hope, and manifesting a place where everybody has a space to be free and joyful and have abundance, starting with the people who have it the least, right? So that also doesn't mean that we shy away from justice. It doesn't mean that we shy away from focusing on communities who have been marginalized. It doesn't mean any of that. This is not about kumbaya. This is about like operating from a place of possibility and abundance, even when we're talking about social justice issues, because that's what we need the most, if you ask me, which you did. So there. That's what I think.
That was a great question, and that was a great, even better response. And I just love where this goes. So I did want to remind everybody that in the fall, we have a 3-day Northeast Filmmakers Lab, and I want to let them know that submissions are going to be opening up right after my next board meeting, so which is next week. So look on Film Freeway. We'll also look on our website, cinemaexchange.org. Anasa Troutman, thank you so much for being with us.
Mike, and thank you to Lauren and to I forgot the other guy's name. Rob, Carmen, everybody. Thank you for, and everybody whose name we don't know. Thank you for spending your time with us and for feeling like what I had to say was worthy of your time and attention. I really am really grateful for you, and I hope you go out and create a whole new world where I can live in and be happy.
Oh, that is awesome. Let's make that happen, people. Thank you all for being with us. Thanks to our sponsors, Price Shopper, Market 32, Albany Wine and Dine for the Arts, Crew Me Up, Connect, Create, Collaborate, crewmeup.com, yayflix.com. Next week's guests include Alex Ferrari, Indie Film Hustle Podcast, and Emily Best of Seed and Spark. If your business would like to sponsor future episodes, maybe can't do it now, yet a year from now, donate, cinemaexchange.org/donate. Enjoy, everyone. Stay healthy, stay connected. Love you, Anasa. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. See you all.
This has been Mike Camoin for Check the Gate. Our gate is good. Moving on, people.
Moving on.
Moving on. Cheers.